Hi, it's Ollie from Till the Wheels. In the summer, we recorded an interview with Frank Turner, and here it is. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. How are you? It's been a really weird year, and it's affected our industry, definitely your job, a lot. So, how are you feeling about everything at the moment?
It's been quite the wrench the last year. I mean, you say it affects our industry and my job. It affects our culture, is how I put it. Do you know what I mean? And like, as with many things, you sort of don't quite figure it out until it changes. I'm trying to skirt around quoting Joni Mitchell there. But like, I didn't quite realise how central to my identity and character and life and culture and all these things that going to shows was. And it, because like I do go to shows when I'm not on tour, and I am on tour most of the time, and just being in a room like this, crammed up against other people watching a band, is just what I spend the majority of my time doing. And I obviously haven't done that in a long time, and it's weird. And there's financial aspects to it and blah, blah, blah. But like the main thing for me, like I say, is kind of identity really. Like I had a real tough time at the beginning of the pandemic because it was just like, who precisely am I supposed to be if I'm not the guy who's always on tour, whatever, however you want to put it. It's funny, like there's a thing, I have a sort of theory, I guess, that like a lot of people, emphatically including me, in years gone by, there's a little part of you that's sort of secretly hoping for some kind of global crisis because it would make life interesting. Do you know what I mean? It would break up the monotony. Now we've had one, and I promise never to say that ever again or think it or whatever, because it's bollocks. Do you know what I mean? And like, or at least this version of it is. As a corollary to all of that, obviously, and a lot of people talk about this, there are opportunities for change that are presented by an event like this, and I think that we should collectively be investigating that and seizing it, and so on and so forth. Nevertheless, the broad strokes of the last year it's been shit.
Fair enough. I entirely agree. What have you discovered about yourself when you take away the culture and the activity of going out to a show, doing a show? What have you discovered about that?
I mean, there's been a few things. Like, I mean, one thing, I feel very lucky that the pandemic happened when I was the age that I was when it happened, because like, I was in my late 30s, I just got married, I like my wife, you know what I mean? And like, I sort of, settled down in a place. Also, to be honest, I've spent quite a lot of the last 5 years figuring myself out a little bit. I got involved in kind of cognitive behavioural therapy, sorted out my substance abuse issues, I'm pleased to say, and all this kind of thing. And then sort of undercurrent of all of that was kind of trying to just sort of have a bit of a personality outside of my career, which I think I didn't for a time, and I think that's not very healthy. And so I was very lucky that I'd at least started thinking along those lines before it all got switched off. I mean, I guess there's been some moments of like figuring out, I don't want to be quite so dramatic as like find out who your real friends are kind of thing, but it's been interesting to see who you maintain regular contact with when the context of life changes. Do you know what I mean? So like my touring crew, for example, and we chat every day, and I'm very pleased about that. It's nice to know, do you know what I mean? And there are some people who I chat to every week, and there are some people who I haven't spoken to since March 2020 or before. And there's certainly a subsection of my social life of people I see on tour. So I know that when I go to New Jersey, I'm going to see X, Y, Z, and when I go to Berlin, I'm going to see these people. And do you know what I mean? You have tour friends. I haven't seen any of those people, obviously, because I haven't been anywhere. And that's one of those things you don't sort of notice at first, because they're not people you see regularly, but then a year and a bit later, you're like, I haven't seen like Kofta in forever, do you know what I mean? And it's, so that's been interesting. One of the other things about it, which this is I'm an incorrigible optimist, one of the positive spins for me has been like the whole thing of live streaming and all that as really, which was a necessary, not evil, but like a necessary mechanism. But like one of the things that it's done, which I think is really cool, is it's put this really laser sharp focus on what is exciting about live music. Because if you think about it, like if you're watching a live stream, sometimes there are angles in which it could, in theory, be almost better than a gig. You get your own beer from the fridge, you can pause it and go to the bathroom. You can, you might well get a better line of sight and a better sound than you would if it like a bigger show, especially, do you know what I mean? All these things. But of course it's nothing like a gig. It's rubbish compared to a gig. And so that makes you go, well, what is different? And it's because gigs are about a sense of communality, gathering, of togetherness, whatever you want to say. It's, of course, it's about the music and all that, but it's also about standing shoulder to shoulder with people you don't know. Do you know what I mean? And there's something in that which I think I kind of knew anyway, but it's just been really, really emphasised by the last year. And I like that. It's kind of cool. It's just like, yeah, that is what's good about gigging culture, is it's about kind of a body of people being more than the sum of their parts, however you want to put it.
Do you feel that what's happened has brought an emphasis onto, the struggle of live music or live music venues? Because there's been a struggle for years. You've been involved in the Music Venue Trust.
Well, that's the thing. So I was involved in the Music Venue Trust way before the pandemic, which goes to show that it's not exactly... I mean, there are some people who seem to think that like people run venues because they're in it for the money, and I'm like, if you're in it for the money, you're an idiot, because there isn't any. Do you know what I mean? It's like it's always been a labour of love. I got involved in the venue thing right at the start of the first lockdown for a couple of reasons. I mean, first of all, it was obvious to me that people whose business model is centred on gathering large numbers of people together in a confined space were going to be in deep trouble because there's a transmissible disease doing the rounds and all the rest. And I mean, even just like I did a bunch of stuff trying to help out my touring crew, because the thing is like, I make the majority of my income from touring, but I'd still have, there's a bit of money from record sales and t-shirts and all that kind of thing. But if you make your living touring or playing shows, you're fucked. So it was like, cool, help out with that. The other thing was that of course, loads of things were hit hard by the pandemic, and I'm not saying that music venues are the most important thing, but it was something that I knew a bit about already and where I felt I could make an appreciable difference. And maybe that's a kind of selfish way of looking at it, but it was like, if I do this, then it will be a noticeable impact, and that felt like a cool thing to me. So, but yeah, I don't want to sort of sit here and say it's the single most important issue. I mean, it's obviously not, but it's important to me.
Yeah.
And I am proud of the fact that there's a few places that, got through one particular sticky patch of the last year because of one of the shows I did or whatever. That's cool. I mean, obviously, I didn't donate the money myself, really, but like being able to facilitate that gathering of funds kind of thing, that's a cool thing.
You have a UK tour coming up, and you have your new single out, The Gathering.
Yeah.
Would you describe The Gathering as a lockdown single?
Well, okay. I have a bit of the theory that the music industry is going to be plagued by lockdown songs for a bit. And there's understandable reasons for that. On some levels, the purpose of art is to interpret the world, and the world has been affected by a pandemic, so of course going to write about it. But there's a problem in the sense that there's an inbuilt time delay in the music industry between writing a song and then recording a song and then releasing a song and then touring a song. And I'm just not entirely sure that people are going to want songs about what life was like in April 2020 in summer 2022. I mean, personally, I'm a bit like, yes, it was rubbish, I know, I don't want to talk about it anymore. But so The Gathering, I mean, it was an attempt at a forward-looking song, and it goes to everything I've been chatting about what's exciting about live music. And, I'm raring to go. The whole thing of unlocking, I think, is possibly going to be more complicated than some people seem to think it is. A lot of people, including me, you initially focus on the euphoric aspect of it. It's just like, oh my God, the first time I'm allowed to be back at a full cap show with sing-alongs and crowd surfing is going to be, I'm going to cry.
Yeah.
And that is true. Of course it's true. At the same time, right at the beginning, because there's some people who don't care about pandemic restrictions, personal space, whatever. And there's some people who are going to be very nervous going back to shows, and there's a broad spectrum in between these two. And I think that there's going to be some awkward moments. Do you know what I mean? If you pick me up right now and put me in the middle of a sold-out Shepherd's Bush Empire, that would be quite weird.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And the question is, would that weirdness last for 30 seconds until I was like, and crowd surfing? Or is it something that's going to take a few months to figure out in my head? Or do you know what I mean? No one really knows, because it's never happened before ever really. And so I think there's going to be some slightly weird moments. Having said that, one of the things I'm excited about certainly the next 6 months, possibly a year, is that I think that things are quite chaotic at the moment, and I like that.
Yeah.
Generally, and there are people I know in the industry who are just their approach is basically to sit tight until everything's back to quote unquote normal. I can sort of sympathise on some levels with that, but it also seems like a lame thing to do to me, because it's exciting. No one knows what the rules are, therefore make your own fucking rules. And it's like, I'm doing a bunch of shows this summer where we've basically built a stage on the side of a truck and we're just rocking up and playing in some places. We're doing that. And indeed, you know, it's just like things come up and it's like, yeah, fuck it, I'll do it. I'm lucky in the sense that I'm quite flexible. I can play a full band show. I can play with just me and my guitar, and that makes the logistics easier. But it, you know, I want to take the attitude of just like, fuck it, do it. Do you know? Dare I say it? Do it yourself. That was on brand, wasn't it? But like, you know, just get out there, and there's something cool about it, because what all of that does for me is it really focuses in on what the point of my job is supposed to be. I'm an entertainer. I play music for people to enjoy music, and all of the bollocks that goes around it. And there's reasons for some of it. Do you know what I mean? But like, I can just stand on a beer crate with a guitar and play, and some people would enjoy that. Yeah. But like, you know, why not just do that? Do you know what I mean? Why wait until you can have a full festival with a security team and a VIP area and, you know, whatever? Like, just do it, you know?
Would you say that that is from something that maybe you have from growing up in DIY and punk?
Yeah. Well, okay, now we get to the meaty issue, right?
Yeah.
The term DIY is a storied one, and often a controversial one, or at least a way of starting arguments. And lots of people have very strong opinions about it. And I can understand there are plenty of people who think it's ridiculous for me to talk about what I do being DIY. And I get that, in the sense that I have a booking agent, I have a record label, I license records to a major label. Do you know what I mean? Like, none of that's quote unquote DIY. And I sort of accept that, actually. But for me, there is an element to which it's just a mindset. You know, I did my first tour in summer '98 when I was 16 years old, and the reason we did it is because me and my friends were in a punk band, and we were like, what do punk bands do? Well, they tour. Well, how do you tour? And we'd read Get in the Van by Henry Rollins, and we have Fracture Zine, which used to have like a BYOL section at the back or whatever. And we went, okay, let's book a tour. So me and my mate Chris booked a 2-week tour from a payphone, by calling everyone we'd met at shows in London from elsewhere in the UK and asking if they could help. And then we got in a van which was driven by the only person we knew who was old enough to drive a van, who turned out to be a total psychopath. And we drove around the country for 2 weeks and played to largely no one at all. And we all got the flu and lost money, and it was amazing. It was the time of my life. And you know, but the point there being, it was like, I'm not going to sit around and wait for somebody to tell me that now you're allowed to tour, or now I'm going to make you tour. It was like, I'm in a band, I want to tour because that's what bands do. Okay, well, let's just figure out how to do that. So we did that. We put out our first record by, this being the 90s, our guitarist's mum had a CD burner, which was big news back then, except it took like pretty much 45 minutes to burn the CD, and it was like, okay. And we released our first record on hand-burned CDs, and we did 200 of them, which took a lifetime, as far as I can remember, and put it out. But this is the point. Now I have a record label that will release records for me, and the way I think about it is that's fantastic, because it gives me more time to then go out and do other things.
A lot quicker.
Do you know what I mean? Yeah, and it just sort of for me, if I can free up time by somebody else taking care of a certain kind of stuff, great, as long as they're people I trust, which self-evidently they are, because I work with them, and then that frees up my time to do whatever else it is I want to do with my time. I mean, quite often just be on tour forever, not the last year, but you know, so it's a mentality for me. Do you know what I mean? And that goes to what we're talking about this summer, like, you know, and indeed rest of the year. It's like, I'm not going to sit around and wait until I can just go out and do 10 dates in Academy venues again. I will do that when I can, and it'll be fun, but like in the meantime, cool. My crew just literally knocked the side out of a truck and built a PA into it, and then we're like, sweet, here we go, stage, gigs, go. And that's the same mentality to me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Just not waiting for permission, I think, is the main thing. Do you know what I mean? It's like exploring the possibilities in life. And it's funny, like, you know, I'm always careful about how I phrase this. I was part of the UK HC scene in the 90s and a little bit longer. there's no universe in which I'm like an operative part of the UKCC.
I mean,
these
I
days.
remember you being part of the UK hardcore scene, and
Yeah,
and all
a long
this.
time ago.
Well, I mean, I'll tell you, when I'm running shows in South London, the amount of people that I've met over the years who've got into punk rock through Frank Turner.
Well,
is-
which I'm very proud of, and like it's a funny thing. There are people who like seem to think it's some kind of insult to describe someone as a gateway band, and I'm like, if all I ever amount to is a gateway band to get more people into punk rock, very happy with that. But like, it's funny because so on that level, like, you know, I've met people around the world who I remember from UKC shows in the late '90s in London, and it might be Bring Me the Horizon's tour manager. And it might be a guy who runs a venue in like New Jersey, and do you know what I mean? And it's like, there's just something quite nice. It's like veterans almost. You know what I mean? I'm like, oh yeah.
Totally, yeah.
Yeah.
I got a job at driving for a brewery recently, and my boss there was a guy I remember from ska punk bands 10 years ago.
Amazing.
You know?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
yeah.
It's beautiful.
I've got a story actually. When I was going to a school disco in year 9, I think,
Right.
and I had the split Knee Jerk and Abjure, and I played it in my dad's car.
Right.
He wasn't very keen. He said it sounded like me when I had colic. But a few years later, well, probably, yeah, quite a few years later, we had Love Iron Song in the car because I'd seen you at Queen Charlotte in Norwich, I think, and I
Yeah.
picked it up. Yeah, and that became the family favourite in the car.
Amazing.
Yeah, so I think about that.
That's cool.
I think about that,
I like
and I
that.
think about like,
So I cured my colic.
yeah, you cutie.
There was a review of our side of that split that said it sounded like 3 pterodactyls fighting over a kill in terms of the vocals, which I enjoyed. There's bits of that split of my side of that split which make me want to kind of bury myself in the
What were you,
desert.
17, 18?
17,
Yeah.
yeah. In which case it's kind of like, well, possibly even 16 when we made it, thinking
Yeah.
about it. Yeah. So, you know. Anyway, but I mean, it's one of the things this isn't really on topic, but fuck it. one of the joys of life, of getting a bit older for me, is just that like, I'm completely aware that I'm not as tuned into the underground scene as I could be, and probably shouldn't be, in the sense that I remember being 16, 17, 18, going to shows, and it was so fucking exciting, and there was usually some old fucker in the back wearing a Dead Kennedys jacket, complaining that it wasn't like it was in his day. Don't want to be that guy,
No.
and I'm very happy that that it's all going on, but at the same time, it's like, you know, you and I, or indeed me and anyone, we can have conversations, and it's like there's actually a fair amount of hinterland to discuss now. Do you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, I toured before SatNav. I toured before mobile phones, actually.
Yeah.
That was a fucking night. And one of the things I remember from that, which I love, which we did on that first tour in '98, one of the tips we got given by a friend of mine just before we left, because this is before SatNav, you know, it was before even like, you know, the AA website.
Route planner.
Yeah, it was just map books and shit. And a guy we knew told us if you couldn't find the venue, drive to the shit end of town and ask someone in a leather jacket.
It's great advice.
And it worked.
Yeah.
In Leeds, it worked. We couldn't find 120 Rats because it was a squad. And we just were like, right, this looks horrible around here. Let's ask someone. There was a guy in a leather jacket, and we were like, do you know where 120 Rats is? He went, yeah, it's over there.
Yeah,
And it worked. I couldn't believe it.
great. I'm always clicking onto stuff where I relate as a punk, as opposed to just somebody who's listening to a song generally. Was that a conscious thing then, or is it a conscious thing now, or is it just more of an expression of yourself? Because with that, it felt like playing records in my mum and dad's car felt like I was kind of like had a Trojan horse.
Yeah.
And I was like, see, you do like punk.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know?
That's a good question. The way I think about myself, my identity, whatever, is definitely pretty heavily rooted in punk. But then, in what I think is quite a punk fashion, my opinion about punk tends to shift depending on who I'm talking to, in the sense that if I'm in a room full of punks, I'm usually figuring out what's wrong with it. And if I'm in a room full of people who aren't punks, I'm the most staunch defender of the concept you've ever met in your fucking life. You know what I mean? So, which feels quite punk.
Yeah.
But like, you know, it's definitely, as a concept, as a scene, as an ideology, all these kind of things, it has its ups and downs. And I've definitely had crappy moments in my life because of my association with it. Just in the sense that, I mean, so for example, I remember chatting with my friend Scott Hutchison, the late Scott Hutchison of Frightened Rabbit, who's a dear friend of mine, who's an amazing musician, whose career was at a similar place to mine, who didn't come from the punk scene in any way, shape or form. And we were both kind of doing an album at the same time, and we had similar things going, like the labels do these days, like, you know, get a pre-order, get a t-shirt, or all this kind of thing. I was drowning in flack from punk people for being a sellout for doing pre-orders with free t-shirts, or whatever the fuck it was, I can't even remember. Scott, no one gave a shit. And he was just like, look at it, oh, that's weird, isn't it? And it was just like, yeah, that's kind of because I grew up with punk rock. There's a funny thing in punk conceptually, which is like, it almost sometimes it's like a misfiring instinct sometimes, I think. On the one hand, I get it, suspicion of like corporate structure, suspicion of motives when people become interested in motivating factors outside of the punk scene, whether, you know, money, success, whatever it might be. All those kinds of things, I get it, and they're there for a reason, and there's good history behind those and all the rest of it. The flip side of it, for a lot of people, it just translates into just knee-jerk suspicion of any sort of success, which sometimes I just find really disappointing. And like, I remember I toured with Gaslight Anthem just as they were blowing up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people were just like, well, fuck Gaslight Anthem now. And it was just like, but they're the same band, and they're still on an indie label, and they're brilliant, and they're lovely people. And just like, there's part of me in that situation, I want to be a cheerleader. It's like, yes, one of ours is doing well. And, you know, I emphatically reject the idea that music's competition. It never was anyway, but particularly in the world of streaming and all the rest of it. If one band does well, it doesn't mean other people do badly. It's not a zero-sum game.
It's self-defeating for the culture,
Yeah,
I feel.
Totally. And then we get back to this gateway thing. Do you know what I mean? Like, I had a hilarious thing years ago. Got into an internet kerfuffle. Oh joy! Because I was chatting. I played a Blink 182 cover somewhere, and somebody said something slightly sniffy about it, and I was like, nobody wakes up one morning and goes, I'm going to buy a Bomb the Music Industry CD.
Yeah.
You got there somehow. Yeah. And it was, for my age group, it was Green Day and Offspring. Yeah. And then from Green Day and Offspring, you got to NoFX, then you got to Descendants, then you got to Black Flag, and then you're out. Do you know what I mean? But it was like Blink-182, gateway band for hundreds of thousands of people the world over, and good for them on that level. So I said this, and then a whole bunch of Bomb the Music Industry fans decided to have a go at me about it. But interestingly, Jeff chimed in and was like, no, this is a totally valid point. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, that is correct. Nobody fucking just wakes up and goes, I'm going to start listening to Swans. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you have to get into underground culture somehow or other. And so this is the other thing. It's like, on the one hand, I understand why people are defensive of underground culture, because it is something that people feel ownership of, and it's, in many cases, and at its best, I think, a refuge from the shittiness of mainstream culture and all these kinds of things. But at the same time, with that in mind, my first experience of punk rock was as a refuge, and I stumbled across it, and I fucking hated my life, and I found like-minded people. I remember going to my first hardcore show, which was at the Garage in '97. I went to see Agnostic Front, and there were just people wearing t-shirts of bands I'd heard of, who nobody I knew had heard of. It had been this little thing I did on my own, and it would just felt safe, and it felt like a homecoming. So it's just that weird sort of thing of trying to pitch it right between, on the one hand, sort of defending the boundaries, but not closing the door. Do you know what I mean? It's like, you don't want to have it so that people feel excluded from it, or at least that's what I think. And I think it's really important that it's a welcoming environment. So, yeah, so punk rock conceptually, I mean, it is, sorry, I've gone miles off topic.
No, this is cool.
You know, it is really important to me, but I, like anybody, there are certain strands of it that I choose to emphasize over others. And that thing of it being kind of an outsider culture that is welcoming is very, very important to me. You know, and like, I want it to be, when it comes to what I do, I go to great lengths to make sure that my shows are welcoming and safe environments for everybody. So whether that can be any number of things, and indeed in a way that sometimes pisses the punks off. I want to play venues that are big enough for everyone to get in. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to do underplays that feel exciting, because when I was a kid and a band I liked did an underplay, I couldn't fucking get in because I wasn't cool enough to know anyone who could get me in. Yeah. And then so I was just standing outside like a dickhead. And I'd rather play enough room for everybody who wants to come in. But then also, you know, we take out. We've done Safe Gigs for Women, we've taken out Stay Up Late, who do people with learning disabilities getting shows. I've got an Ally Coalition t-shirt on under my quite filthy hoodie. And, you know, and just sort of those kind of things, because I guess my thinking about it is over the years is like, I'm not sure whether music changes the world, but what I can do is have some control over the atmosphere at my shows. That's definitely true. And then hopefully, if you curate that a little bit, that will demonstrate some values that will spread outside of that. Personally, you know, a band standing up and going, we're going to overthrow the government by playing 2.5-minute long songs is a bit like, really? But if you can create an environment and an atmosphere in which certain values and certain ways of treating other people are apparent, that can then filter through to other people's behaviour, which is certainly what happened to me. You know, I went to punk shows and hardcore shows and discovered all these ideas and ways of treating people, and I took them outside of that into the rest of my life.
So when you're putting these things in place, you very much got this yourself as a young person.
Oh yeah,
and
absolutely.
That's at the forefront always.
A few years ago, I've done this thing called Lost Evenings, a little festival that I put on myself, and I think it was at the second one in Camden in 2018. Just as it was all, there's that weird calm moment. You have months and months and months of prep, and everyone running around screaming and pulling their hair out, and it's the kind of 5 minutes before doors when you all just stand there and go,
yeah.
And you know, Camden High Street was sort of rammed with people coming to the show and all this kind of thing. And my mate Evan, who's one of my dearest and oldest friends from hardcore days as well, he turned around and went, I figured you out. And I said, what are you talking about? And he said, all of this bullshit. He was like, it's just you trying to recreate what you thought punk should be when you were a kid and didn't quite turn out to be. And I was like, you know what? Yeah, fair cop, fuck it, why not? Do you know what I mean? And like, obviously there's a prerequisite to all of this, which is that people have to like my music to want to come to it. I obviously understand that. But to the extent, but some people do. The crazy fuckers. And so with it, once you've established that, it's like, yeah, it is cool. And there's a bunch of stuff that come out of it. Like there's a group called the Solo Armada who do a thing about like just trying to make sure people can go to gigs on their own, and you wear a little badge with a logo, and if somebody's wearing that badge, it's a sign sort of going, I'm ready to say hello because I'm here on my own, kind of thing. And it's a really nice thing.
That's
and
really
they started at Lost Evenings, and it's thankfully graduated far beyond me, which is great, because what I do is just a tiny little thing. And I think that's cool as shit, just little things like that. It's nice.
You've said many times that you're not an activist, but a lot of what you're talking about sounds like activist work.
I'm the word activism for me. The word activism for me is a high bar.
Okay.
As in, I know people who are activists and who I respect to the ends of the fucking earth, but they're people who work 24 hours a fucking day at a thing and have a very clearly thought out set of ideals and indeed purpose and structure and strategy and all those kinds of things. I don't want to just sort of throw that word on myself.
Yeah, sure.
In a kind of like, oh, that's easy kind of way. It's not fucking easy. It's a full-time job, and it's not the full-time job that I do. So, do you know what I mean? That's my reticence about it. It's not because I think there's anything wrong with being an activist. It's because I'm not one, and I don't want to pretend to be something that I'm not.
Yeah, cool.
You know, and indeed, a lot of the time, those activists will be people that we work with in all the environments that we're talking about now. And I want to kind of defer both to their dedication and their expertise. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to just sit here and go, oh yeah, I'm an activist.
Yeah.
It's like, no, you're fucking not.
Well, I would say that your art has activist elements, and you use your career with activism in mind, in terms of stuff like what you're doing. Where you've been in Sierra Leone with
totally.
and stuff. And Joe Strummer Foundation.
Yeah, totally. But again, the Joe Strummer Foundation is people who are doing the work there.
Yeah, of course.
I'm the mascot.
Yeah. Like the PR kind of...
I'm the guy in the big furry suit going, woo,
and
other people are doing the actual work behind it, do you know what I mean? But like, the only other thing I say about like, there's a distinction in my mind here, which is that like, I think that utilising the fact that people want to come together to come and see me at a show or whatever it might be, in order to kind of discuss certain ideas and certain methods of treating people, I'm all about. I do have a little thing in my heart, which is that, and this is just for me, it's not normative, I'm not saying this about other people, but for me, music wants to be an end in itself. Do you know what I mean? There are plenty of people, it's like, I'm in a band because I want to forward this idea. And it's like, cool, for me, I want to be in a band because I want to be in a band. Do you know what I mean? It's like the song is the song, and it's just a thing unto itself. And there's something, I get a bit defensive about art at this point, and it's just like, I just want music to be its own end.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And not in every case, but there are definitely times when there's a band whose music is a means to an end, and boy, can you fucking tell. Do you know what I mean? And like, and it's cool. Everyone's allowed to do what they want. It's not my business. But for myself, it's like, you know, I want the music to be the end point, and it's so much more important to me to be a musician and a songwriter than it is to be anything else.
I suppose if you make that the end point, then you have a song that has more power.
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. So there's definitely kind of like cross-contamination over this line that I'm trying to draw.
But I'm not saying that you're focusing on the song being the end point so that you can then. Yeah.
No, I know what you mean. But I mean, and you know, you're in order to maybe not disprove, but give another view on everything I'm talking about. You're wearing a Propaganda t-shirt.
Yeah,
and like,
for real.
One of my fucking favourite bands ever. And good lord, do they. But then, I mean, they're good enough. Do you know what I mean? It's like the music is good enough.
But I wonder what they'd say about the song and the end point, because they use their music in a activist way.
Absolutely.
But when it comes down to thrashing, they know.
Right. I mean, but that's the thing is like it works with Propaganda because they fucking rock.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And like so, and that, they'd have a very different opinion on that. But that's why I say it's like this isn't in any way intended to be like a
blanket thing,
or what other people should do. I've never been that comfortable trying to tell anybody else what they should do, and the older I get, the less I try and do it because I don't know fucking anything about anything. So do you know what I mean? It's like I'm not trying to dictate other people's behaviour or opinions or judgment or anything like that.
But it's interesting to hear what you think about it.
Yeah, sure. But I'll apply that to myself. But it's like, it is funny, we do live in a slightly totalising world in which a lot of people seem to think that if one person does think certain things about the way they see the world, then they must necessarily think that everyone should do that. I try not to do that. This is what I've figured out about myself, but other people look at it other ways.
I think that's a punk rock thing is, it's what we were talking about before, about doing your own thing, pushing your own thing forward.
Totally.
And I think that's one of the beautiful things about punk rock is that it's a constant place of challenge and argument. And I mean, it's not particularly pleasant sometimes, but it's useful in the way that you're around people that are going to challenge your sort of preconceived things.
Absolutely. And like, sort of slightly like almost final statement territory, but like punk rock and DIY punk rock it's still where I learned everything I know. I've gone on to learn other things and experience other things, but my starting point for how to be a musician and how to be an adult to a degree came at punk shows and at hardcore shows. And I still go back to it all the time. I'm not interested because Jesus Christ, I've got other things to do with my life in an argument about whether or not what I do or who I am still constitutes as punk in somebody else's view. I don't care. But like for me, it's still rooted in that first experience, you know, and I still consider my actions and my choices and my beliefs through that prism all the time.
Yeah, great. I mean, that is a final statement,
Sorry.
isn't it?
I didn't mean, and now we're fucking done.
No. But it was good.
I'll tell you what, though. I'll give you the one other thing we should talk about, and this is one of my grand theories.
Okay.
One of the grand theory. Punk rock is like Catholicism.
Oh, go on.
Okay, because whilst there may be such a thing as an ex-Catholic or indeed an ex-punk, it's still, the word Catholic or punk is still in your sort of definition, you know what I mean? And there definitely is such a thing as punk rock guilt.
Yeah.
And Ian Mackay is the Pope.
Yeah.
And like, I fucking lie awake at night feeling guilty about things because of punk and because I'm wondering whether or not, you know, Johnny Thunder's got an opinion on what I'm doing. And it's nonsensical in its way. But and it's like, you know, you might try and get out of it, but you'll never quite get out of it. Do you know
it's always there.
It's always part of your makeup. And actually, given that I think that punk's contribution to the world is rather better than the Catholic Church's contribution to the public world, I'm fine with that. You know, but it is funny. Like, there's definitely in the way that like people talk about like you're never a non-Catholic. You might be an ex-Catholic, but if you've been one at one point, so.
That was our interview with Frank Turner. Big thanks to Frank, big thanks to the New Cross Inn, and big thanks to The Floor. And thank you for watching. See you later.